Gentleman, Ms. Stefanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony this morning. This question is for General Mayville and General Stewart. In your opening statement, General Stewart, you state, I quote, "A confluence of global political, military, social, and technological developments have created security challenges more diverse and complex than those we have experienced in our lifetimes." Much of today's testimony focuses upon what we do know. My question is related to what we don't know but should. What do you think are the biggest gaps in our understanding of threats to our national security?
Let me think about that one. I'm hesitating just a little bit for a couple different reasons. One, we've covered a pretty wide front when we talk about the threat. So we talked about existential threat with China and Russia, all the way through terrorism and counter narco-terrorist capability in our statement. So the biggest gap is really just understanding them all enough with enough exquisite detail to shape policy early enough. So we think we've got the scope of the threat about right. How we can do this in a more nuanced, more exquisite way and deliver it early enough for decision makers is probably the gap. And do it, as I mentioned earlier, in an environment where it's so dynamic, where events are changing constantly, where social media is shaping our policy because we can now transmit at a moment's notice around the globe on a whole host of social media devices. So it makes the decision space that we used to be able to give policymakers much shorter. And so the challenge is finding the key, that needle in the haystack, and doing it early enough and getting out ahead of the social media today, the information space. So I think that's probably where I'd say the gap is. Defining the range of threats, I think, is we're pretty close.
Great, thank you. General Mayville?
So what's going on in the world? Well, we're seeing the emergence of not just violent extreme organizations, but violent extreme organizations within a much broader trans-regional framework. We're seeing global economic shifts. We're seeing shifts in regional power balances. We're seeing rising powers, the return of some geopolitical rivalries. There are clearly some new relationships that we need to develop, and the management of current client states is challenging. I'm concerned that there are conflicts that on the surface don't appear to affect us and that we somehow can ignore them. But if you ask me, and that's not true, I think we have to, there are some things that only we can do, and we are a global leader. But if you ask me what is it that I am most concerned about, I'm concerned about our services and our forces' ability, our military force, our joint force, their ability to have the wherewithal, the flexibility to manage the training, the readiness, and the modernization. And it is perhaps, it's important to remember it's an all-volunteer force. And the stress and demands that we are placing on this force, we should not take for granted. The soldiers, the sailors, the airmen, Marines, and their families. I think we're asking a lot of them. And it's very, very important that as we think about the future, a future that we will continue to not get right. We need to make sure that we have given to the department the flexibility it needs to manage the three major balls that we need to manage, the current contingencies, the training, the readiness, the force modernization, and being able to take care of people. And I think that we will continue to have the force we need, and I think our nation will continue to be secure, and your military will be able to meet its security requirements.
Thank you very much. I yield back.